I'm a 21-year-old male, and this experience happened last summer while I was on vacation at Myrtle Beach with my family. We were staying in a resort right on the beach, on the 13th or 14th floor in a timeshare. One night, I was feeling restless and having a hard time falling asleep. At around 3 a.m., I decided to go out on the balcony to get some air. I stepped out and was stunned by the beauty of the full moon and the moonlight on the water. The beach was completely empty as far as I could see, and I had never seen it like that before. Since I couldn't sleep, I thought I might as well head down, take a stroll, and listen to some music to relax. Hopefully, when I returned, I'd be able to get some sleep. It was really unsafe and dumb of me, but since it was 3 a.m. and the rest of my family was asleep, I decided to head down without letting anyone know I was going. I thought I'd just go and chill there for 15 minutes and then come right back up. At the base of the timeshare, there was an area with a pool, an outdoor bar, and 2 boardwalks separated by about 100 feet, both leading to the beach. On the sides of the boardwalks, there were swaths of tall grass separating the ocean and the resort. When I got down to the base, the entire area was completely deserted, and I started walking down the boardwalk on the right towards the beach. As I walked down, I suddenly saw someone approaching me from the beach. This was strange, because I had a pretty clear view of this same area from the balcony just before and had seen no one. I started to get a bit nervous as I saw this figure approach, and as I got closer, I saw it was a man, maybe in his late 30s, who had a backpack on and was wearing glasses with large square lenses. As he got closer, I got a clearer look at him as the boardwalk was sort of illuminated by lights from the outdoor bar. He looked very on edge and alert, almost like he was trying to find someone. His clothes were somewhat tattered. We made eye contact. I nodded at him, and he passed by. I was creeped out because, honest to God, he had a sort of Jeffrey Dahmer look. Maybe it was the glasses, but he just didn't seem like he actually belonged to the timeshare. I shook it off, kept walking down to the beach, and put my headphones in. As I got down to the beach, I turned right and started walking parallel to the water, just taking in the scenery. I was barefoot and decided it'd be nice to walk along the shoreline, so I moved closer to the water and continued walking. I was walking for no longer than a minute before I got a really strange feeling that something was wrong. I took off my headphones and turned around. I saw a dark figure trailing me just upshore, situated between me and the timeshare. I immediately could tell from the figure's height, body type, and demeanor that it was the same man I had passed on the boardwalk. At this point, I started to panic, as every horror story I've read rushed into my head. At the same time, I tried to rationalize it because it felt too surreal that I might actually be in a dangerous situation. I reminded myself it could just be a coincidence, and the man decided he also wanted to take a walk on the beach and just happened to be headed in the same direction as me. I took some breaths, turned my head back to the ocean, and continued walking in the same direction. After a couple of seconds, I turned my head back again and saw that now he was much closer to me. He was not walking parallel to me, but was definitely walking towards me. I picked up my walking speed, turned my head back around, and saw he was matching my faster pace and still walking towards me in the water. Still, for some reason I thought, okay, maybe he also wants to walk by the water. There's no way I'm actually being followed by a creepy man on a deserted beach. So, at this point, to truly test it, I did a 180 and completely changed directions. As I turned my head, I saw him completely change directions with me and continue closing the distance, now power walking. It suddenly hit me that I was in a really bad situation. I took off running along the water, and he started running as well but stayed upshore of me, so that if I tried to run up towards the boardwalk, he would intercept me. I was freaking out and just kept running with no plan, figuring that since I'm 20 and sort of fit, I should probably be able to keep running along the water and outrun him. Then I could find some other exit off the beach and either call my family or head back to the timeshare on the road. I kept running, but he was keeping up with me. This went on for what felt like 10 to 15 minutes. The scariest part of all this, which I wouldn't have thought of, is that it was completely dead silent. All I heard was my breath and feet on the sand. When I turned, I only saw his shadowy figure up shore, keeping pace with me. Suddenly, up ahead in the sand, I saw a small blue light and what looked like 4 people on the beach with a blanket. They were a bit upshore. I turned and looked at the figure and bet that even though they were upshore, I could beat him to these people. So I started sprinting towards them with hopes of quickly telling them what was going on so we could all confront him. I really used up my energy sprinting towards them, and as I approached, my heart dropped. What I saw were 4 guys on a blanket with 3 or 4 handles of hard liquor surrounding them. 3 of the handles were empty, and the 4th was about half empty. 3 of the guys were completely passed out on the blankets, and the last was half sat up, obviously beyond shit-faced, with a sort of party hat on that had blue lights on it. He was talking to himself. His eyes were half closed, and he didn't even register me approaching, even though now I was no more than 5 feet away. I turned and saw the figure had slowed down and was observing me. Then I saw he made sense of the group's state and suddenly started sprinting at me. As he got closer, the half-passed out guy's blue light illuminated him, and I could clearly see it was the same guy as before. I made eye contact with him. He was wide-eyed and looked almost manic, barreling at me at full sprint. At this point, I decided I had to do something decisive. I had underestimated his fitness, and since I had just sprinted towards this group and exhausted myself, I was afraid that he might actually be able to catch up to me if we just continued running along the beach indefinitely. Who knows what would happen then? So instead of turning around and running, I suddenly sprinted towards him and to the right, which I don't think he was expecting at all. I caught him off balance and ran past him, full sprinting back to the timeshare without even looking back. All the hairs on my neck were standing, and it felt like a dream where you're barely evading someone, but he's right about to catch you. The adrenaline was crazy. I kept running and started to see the timeshare. I finally turned around to see how close he was, and I saw him in the distance, maybe 400 feet away. He had lost a lot of distance on me. I didn't waste any time and sprinted up the boardwalk towards the base of the timeshare. I jammed the elevator buttons, leaped in, and started mashing the close door button as I gasped for air. The door closed, and I hit the button for my floor. When the elevator reached, I literally sprinted back to my room, opened the door, entered, and then slammed the door and double-locked it. I was breathing heavily, and I dropped to the floor and just sat there for a minute, not believing what had just happened. I crouched and crawled over to my room, as I was literally afraid he might be able to see me through the window on our balcony, and I entered my room. Let's just say I definitely wasn't able to sleep after that. This took place around 2008, if my memory serves me right. My family and I had just moved to Costa Rica, and we enjoyed spending most of our time at the beach, particularly one near a lovely little river where I liked to swim. It was on this same beach that 9-year-old me found a dead body floating in the ocean. To give a little context, I had been playing on the beach, which we thought was relatively safe, so my parents were farther up. How wrong we were about it being safe. I remember seeing something floating in the water, but I wasn't sure what it was. I went to investigate and found a dead man just floating there. Part of his leg had been hacked off. It was obvious he had not drowned. The man had clearly been murdered. Around this time, we had heard about a recent string of murders that had happened both on the Caribbean side of Costa Rica, where we were, and on the Pacific side. The murders had been happening every 6 months, rotating between both regions of the country. So there was reason to assume this murder had been done by the same person, since it seemed to fit the timeline. As far as I can remember, The details of the murder were never disclosed in any of the local newspapers, only that the man had been a tourist from England. So there was no way for anyone who had not seen the man on the beach to know the specifics of his murder. Eventually, the whole thing blew over, and we returned to that same beach. I can't quite remember the time frame, but it was definitely within a few months of me finding the dead man that this next part happened. One day, I was swimming in the river with my mother when a very strange man popped up out of the water, startling us. He had a spear gun in hand and a snorkel mask on. He began talking to my mom, and I think we could both tell that something was just off about this guy. I wasn't really paying attention for most of their conversation, but I do remember him bringing up the recent murder on the beach. He seemed to know a great deal of details about it, which, as I previously mentioned, were not available to the public. It almost seemed as if he was trying to confess that he was the one who murdered the man without directly saying so. He also talked about how he traveled between the Caribbean and the Pacific side of Costa Rica, spending half a year in each spot. Eventually, they also got on the topic of what he did for a living. He went into great detail about how he made the masks for the movie Eyes Wide Shut, and that he would make those masks, and presumably other ones, based on real live human emotions. He specifically liked capturing the look of fear. We were totally taken aback by this guy, and didn't really know what to do. Eventually, he just got back into the river and swam away. And thankfully, we never saw him again. I do not know if this is related or not, but the weird string of murders suddenly stopped after that. This all happened in July 2004. I was 12 at the time, and my parents brought me to Kona, Hawaii. Needless to say, it was an amazing time, and just about the last place you'd expect something creepy to happen. That is, until the second to last night there. My parents and I were tossing around a ball in the ocean when I overthrew my dad, and a kid my age caught it. We invited him to join in, and after a while, my parents got tired and went back to the beach while he and I continued playing. A woman who appeared to be his mother was walking around taking pictures of us over and over, and when my mom tried to start a conversation with her, the woman completely ignored her. It turned out Jason lived in Los Angeles and was headed back tomorrow just as we were. We were connecting through LAX, and thank God we didn't share a flight. Once it got dark, we went back to the beach and didn't see Jason's mother anywhere. After searching all over the beach, we headed back to the hotel. To clarify, the hotel was directly behind the beach with a pool and bar in between. You could vaguely see the beach through palm trees depending on the floor, but certainly not your child. We took Jason up to his room to see if his mother was there, and he said hello to a man on the way up as if he knew him. My mom asked if the man was his dad, and he said no, as his father had run off 5 months after he was born. We knocked on the hotel door several times and could hear the TV on, but no one answered. We were all hungry, so we went down to the lobby to use the phone. Jason called up to his room and left a message that we were going to the downstairs restaurant to eat. We had buffalo wings and soda and talked about SpongeBob, etc. He seemed like any other kid. It was a bit strange, though, when we were in the ocean and lost one of our floats. He went swimming after it way too far, and my dad called him to come back. Otherwise, who knows how far he'd have chased it and possibly drowned. Now, it had been at least 3 hours since we saw any sign of his mother until we headed back up to the lobby. She was there by the concierge, screaming at us that she had called the police. Knowing how crazy this was, my dad called them as well. They arrived rather quickly, and we told our story, all the while Jason's mother was shouting, "You're just trash," at us repeatedly. I don't recall Jason saying much of anything. Eventually, the situation died down, and we went back to our rooms, placing a desk in front of the door. Fortunately, we didn't run into them on the way back. When I was a kid, maybe 6 or 7 years old, this was in the mid-1990s, we took a family trip to the beach in Florida. We were staying in a beach house a short walking distance from the beach. One day, we went to the beach, and I was supposed to stay in sight of my mom. But I wandered away, and before I knew it, I was lost. A lot of the houses looked the same, and I wasn't sure which one was ours. Plus, I couldn't see my mom anywhere. It started to rain. I came to a path that I was pretty sure led back to our house. Only, it didn't lead to a house at all, but instead to a parking lot. There was a big, dirty van parked there. It was the only vehicle around. I was about to turn back when I noticed an overweight woman with brown hair, a hot pink tank top, and those big, clunky, thick glasses that were popular in the 80s, waving and smiling at me from the passenger seat of the van. She said something like, "Oh my, it's raining. Where's your mommy? Let us take you to her. It's dangerous to be out here in the rain. You could get struck by lightning." She was very friendly, almost overly so. In the driver's seat was a very overweight man without a shirt on, a hairy gray chest, and some clunky-looking gold chain. He was wearing yellow-tinted Elvis shades and staring at me intently. He was also smoking a cigarette, which I knew was bad. The woman stepped out of the van and kneeled down to me. She asked how old I was. When I told her, she gleefully remarked, "Oh my, we have 2 boys your age at our house. You should come over and spend the night. We've got movies, Nintendo, and in the morning, we've got all types of cereal." I had been taught all about stranger danger, but at this point in my life, no adult had ever given me any reason not to trust them. The lady continued talking about stuff like how the boys have go-karts and they like to drink chocolate milk. She made it seem very enticing for a 7-year-old kid, and at this point, I trusted her. I mostly liked the idea of getting to play with some kids my age. Then I remembered that I needed to ask my mom first. I told her this. She told me that was no problem, that they lived just up the road, and my mom shouldn't mind. It started raining harder, and she opened the sliding door of the van and said something like, "Now let's get you out of this rain and go find your mommy." I knew logically that I shouldn't do this, but the lady seemed really nice, and I was desperately wanting to get out of the rain. As I walked toward the open door of the van, I noticed an awful stench that almost made me gag. This set off alarm bells in my head that something wasn't right. There were cigarette butts all over the floor. I looked up at the fat man who was not only staring at me with this menacing glare, but he had this really creepy, toothy smile, and his teeth were stained a dark yellow. I could pick up on a very messed up vibe from him. I knew now that I should run, but the woman was ushering me to hurry up and get in. Her demeanor had changed. She was being demanding and trying to literally push me into the van. She sounded angry and said, "Get in already," in a tone that was the complete opposite of how she had sounded before. I jumped to the side and started running as fast as I could. The woman managed to grab my arm or wrist, but somehow I was able to quickly break free and run back to the beach. I think she tried to chase me, but as I said, she was very overweight. I made it back to my mom, who was freaking out. I tried explaining what had happened to me, but I don't think that at 7 years old I was able to convey the gravity of what had happened to me, and I didn't fully understand it myself.